introduce you to Bobby Newsome. Woo! Oh yeah, it's a good crowd. Wow, okay, I'm done. A few words. Originally from Harrington, Delaware, Bobby has been gracing us with her presence for the past 3.5 years. Bobby is a senior earning 2 majors, creative writing and English publishing and editing. She's also earning 2 minors, philosophy and professional and civic writing. She is the historian for the Black Student Union, a writing tutor, a student assistant at the Center for Academic Success, and she has served for 3 years as a teaching assistant in our summer writers workshop for high school students. She's currently Dr. Carla Kelsey's TA for our Intro to Poetry workshop. And Bobby is an amazing poet, published multiple times in our literary magazine Rivercraft, and chosen to author the poem featured in our 2024 campus holiday card. She's also a performer, winner of last fall's slam, winner of last spring's grand slam, and I've seen her perform on stage during the African American Poetry Series Community Poetry Night and in the art gallery for an event honoring Valente Frazier and elsewhere. You're in good hands as I turn the evening over to Bobby Newsome.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Dent, for that wonderful introduction. I'm here to introduce our speaker tonight, Khalisa Rae. Khalisa Rae is a multi-hyphenate poet, educator, activist, and journalist based in Durham, North Carolina. Rae completed her MFA at Queen's University of Charlotte, where she studied under renowned authors Claudia Rankine and Ada Limon, the former Poet Laureate of the United States. Rae's articles appear in magazines like Vogue, Gravity News, Catapult, Lit Hub, Jezebel Magazine, and Black Femme Collective. You can find her poetry in Electric Lit, Hypertext, Southern Humanities Review, Crab Fat, Rust and Moth, Flypaper Lit, and many, many more. Her chapbook, Real Girls Have Real Problems, was published in 2012, later adopted into a sold-out play in 2018, and was accompanied by a podcast. Did I forget to mention that Khalisa Rae is also a recognized slam poet, having graced numerous stages, including the National Poetry Slam? She is currently serving as the Theater and Literature Director at the North Carolina Arts Council and is the co-founder of the Griot and Gray Owl Black Southern Writers Conference. And I personally have no idea where Khalisa Rae finds the time to eat and sleep, let alone write. Always an advocate for the African diaspora and Black women, speaking for access to education and the elevation of women's voices with a profound love. These themes are reflected across Khalisa Rae's writings and in her community work as the co-founder of Poet.she, the Invisibility Project, and the Athenian Press and Workshops, and so many more. With accolades like that, it should be no surprise that she has won many awards. As of now, Rae is a 4-time Best of the Net nominee, multi-Pushcart Prize nominee, 2-time Right Wings Poetry Contest winner, and the winner of the White Stag Publishing Contest, among others. Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, released in 2021, is Rae's first book. It has been awarded the Appalachian Arts and Entertainment Award, Vulgar Genius Award, and the Gwendolyn Books Prize. Its pages unearth the ghost of the throat, directly stating all the things we aren't allowed to or supposed to talk about. The book is divided into 3 sections: fire, winds and water, and earth and spirit. These sections move us through tales of the resilience of Black culture and how it has permeated all things of the throat, the physical and mental journey of Black girl becoming Black women, and tells of generations of curses, of triumphs, and the love that carries us into the next. Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat is not a light read. The important things really are. From the first page, it demands the reader reckon with the fact that slavery is not simply something we get over, especially when its effects are constantly being shoved down all of our throats. It reveals the real meaning of Black girl magic and a hidden side of the Southern belle. It is a shout of joy, celebrating that despite everything, Black people and Black women are still here and reclaiming that history with, as Rae says in her titular poem, these voices, these throats, this righteous indignation. Ever an educator, Rae's stanzas are full of references to Black history, literature, and media that she openly invites us to discover. The smart lines are full of rhythmic repetition, alliteration, and all allusion to things that are ingrained in Black culture, in American culture as a whole, and the reasons why, if you're willing to look deeper. The most obvious probably being in the poem Buzzwords and Banned Books. Though I didn't catch all of the references on the first read, I have made a list of all the things that I missed, and I'm going to go over that with my family on Thanksgiving break. And as a Black woman myself, who's gone to South Carolina to visit my extended family every year, going deep through the ghosts and trees to see a grandmother whose dialect hadn't quite ditched slavery, doing everything a bit too much and a bit too loud at the inevitable family cookout, and, and enjoying the privileges of young adulthood amidst the stark realization that the Black family and Black love itself is an act of rebellion, and raising a glass to the cause anyway. All that to say, Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat made me cry a lot. It also made me resolve myself to learn the real power of my voice and reclaiming these phenomenal bones. I know I'm excited to learn something else about the Black South and feel more connected with the part of America that is being actively hidden from us. And I hope you all are too. It is my sincerest honor and pleasure to welcome the brilliant Khalisa Rae.
Hello, how is everyone doing? I first want to start before we get into it, before I sing this quaint, beautiful town's praises, because I want to gush over y'all just really quickly. Before I do that, I just want to say how honored I am to be here. Thank you so much to the program, to the department, to Catherine, to Tony, to Monica for inviting me to come. I am just so elated to be here. So thank you so much. So I think that you all planned to have the cutest parade on the night that I would be reading, knowing I love quaint towns, knowing I love Gilmore Girls, knowing that this is basically Stars Hollow. So I am literally on cloud nine at this very moment. And I feel like I'm going to burst out of my skin. Thank you so much for just making me feel so welcome and so happy. We had such great conversation at dinner tonight. And I just feel more emboldened to tell you all a little bit more about me. Is that okay? So I'm a talker, so we're gonna put this here because I could be here all night with you. But we want to save time for questions, yes, and for book signing. Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat. So I want to also take a second to just say how beautiful that introduction was, Bobby. Can we give it up for Bobby again? What we're not gonna do is we're not gonna make me cry before I have to be all composed. Okay? That's what we're not, that was not the goal. So thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I am just a little Black girl from Gary, Indiana. I had that conversation with my table mates, and I came to Wilmington, North Carolina, because my family thought that that was the best place since I wanted to be an actress and a filmmaker. And in the early 2000s, I wanted to produce films. And so my sister was doing that, and I wanted to follow in her footsteps. She was in Hollywood, and so I said, why not go to the second best place, Wilmington, North Carolina? And what I didn't know was that there were secrets that were hidden behind every monument, in every beach dune, in the rivers and the ocean. It wasn't until I had a conversation with the matriarchs of the town after being severely lost and depressed did I understand the root of my feelings, but also the source of my uncomfortability. And so Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat was born out of the revelation of something that was hidden from us, the history of the 1898 race massacre that happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. And so I laugh today because I say that I was a person with a lot of Midwestern Baptist guilt and trauma that moved to the South that has a lot of guilt and trauma. And then my mind was opened when I decided that the film industry was not for me, but also when I had to contend with not only my identity, my past and history, but the history of the place that my parents had just dropped me into. And so tonight, we are going to go on a little bit of a journey as I shared with the students that came to our intimate Q&A. I am doing something really special tonight. I'm reading new work, and I will be reading one or two poems from Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, but I'm going to read some poems that I actually have not read out loud. They've been recently published. And so I want to start with a poem called Fairly Midland that was recently published, and it's about my grandmother. So we had a conversation at the dinner table about how I feel like I am from nowhere. I was born in Gary, Indiana, right up the street from Michael Jackson. And as I just said, I was then told, you're going to go to Wilmington, North Carolina, kind of against my will. So I went to North Carolina. I went to the South. And I learned that although I have no family in North Carolina, my grandmother migrated from Mississippi to Chicago and then moved to Gary. And that was very formative in learning that. Because if you know anything about learning the history of the Great Migration, you learn a lot about your cultural legacy. And that really shaped me, learning that I do have roots in the South when I came to this place and felt like I didn't belong in the South at all. So this is Fairly Midland. By far, my favorite of Grandma Myrtle's phrases was Fairly Midland. We'd ask her how you be, and she'd say it slow, fairly Midland, child, with a little waddle in her step, hips humming like Sunday hymnal blues, feet that seen the dust of Jim Crow still kicking up unholy smoke. Her mama, a freed woman, purchased land with pennies, raised babies on Mississippi clay, turned soil into sunlight, grew glory from the ground with hands that once belonged to someone else. All my grandmother knew was how to measure time in harvest, not by clocks or calendars, but by whether the ground gave, whether the beans came up strong, whether the sky held up its end of the bargain. As a child, I thought Fairly Midland meant hanging in there, just fine, sugar, barely getting by. But I always wanted more for her, more ease, more light, more crystal stare to call her own, a life not measured by the till and toil. Once, on a whim, I called the NPR podcast to ask them the phrase's origin. They said fairly equals acceptable, midland equals average, a scale farmers use to grade their crops, a quiet truth you whisper to the land when the field doesn't come up in the right length you'd dreamed of. And now I wonder if she felt the seasons turning, the end inevitable rotting her forever. Would have given anything for her to just be okay, for her to be here. And today, I think about the state of things, how I am whatever the word is for not pourable, not quite fine, a pot of grits that won't boil even with the salt, even with the flame turned up real high. At 39, I am fairly, sounds like barely, Midland sounds like making it, and maybe that's what we all are, stuck in the in-between, not quite locust, but close enough to sting, like my grandmother, who born to red dirt and silent mornings kept sowing when the fields came up empty. No rain, she turned to the soil anyway. What does it look like when the harvest is grief? When we plant in something that is cracked concrete? Maybe it's this. We wake up, we drink water, we forgive, we text someone back, you call your mother even when you don't want to, and maybe, just maybe, that's the best we got. Fairly, Midland. Thank y'all. So, my grandmother passed away a couple of years ago, and I have been working on a project to study her legacy and her migration from Mississippi to Chicago. And we were talking about at the dinner table today about how, if you think about it, so my mother is 70 years old. And if you think about it, my grandmother was born in the 20s. And if you just chart, like not even knowing the truth and without any history, I need to go talk to my mother. But if you just do the math, my grandmother moved to Chicago during some really difficult times. And so it's one of those things where when I was writing that poem, I wish I had asked her more questions about that journey. And so I don't take for granted our elders and the conversations that we could have with them, the answers that we could get if we only would talk to them more. Speaking of talking to the ancestors, like I told you, I had to have conversations with the matriarchs of the church that I was going to in Wilmington for them to reveal the secrets of what was going on in this haunted town. So they have ghost tours and ghost exhibits in Wilmington, and it just made me feel really uncomfortable. The more I talked to the ancestors and learned about how they literally threw people's body into the river and drowned them, and the ghosts of people's ancestors were living and breathing, and you could feel them in the town, and I didn't know why and wouldn't have had I not had those crucial conversations with the matriarchs in our community. I talk a lot about the river because that's where the matriarchs took me back to. The water is was very calming for me. It was a place of rest, and now I feel sometimes unsettled by southern waters. This is called float tissue memory. The water knows the buoyancy of bodies, the exact weight of grief and resistance, knows how deep to drown a lie, how softly to cradle a name. The water knows that a coup is easier than a ship's worth of discarding, easier to flip the order than erase it, easier to erase a whole people than to say their magnificent names. The water is smart that way. Got ears, got a heart that feels the pressure to go deeper, refuses to let the truth rise. Chemical and chlorine knows what's buried beneath the tide, knows what floats back up when no one's looking, and I know they never wanted the water to tell us anyway. That's why they kept us out of it. That's why they lock their pools. That's why they drain it after we swim, because water talks too damn much. Water's got a big old mouth, big old gossiping sea, damn lake, damn shoreline, always running its lips, blubbering, bumbling, foamy, soapy truth. Waves that whisper families we were taught to forget. Currents that chant what textbooks never will. Shorelines that hum ancestral psalms in undertow, but we kinfolk. We kinfolk, we saltwater, brown baby buoyants, See bodies, bobbing. Despite what they tell you, we know how to swim. We uncover what's written on the waves. We read the salt script. We listen between the tides. We piece the story back together, bone, by echo, and we uncover what's written on the waves, and we believe it. I am a Midwestern girl through and through, but I have literally been in the South for 20 something years. And I was telling the folks at dinner tonight that I slowly am becoming okay with saying that I'm from the South. But I have been contending with the fact that there's this myth that the South is the worst place to be as a Black woman. And what I know to be true is I felt othered even in Indiana, but that's the thing no one wants to talk about, is the Midwest and the North's got its problems that needs to be contended with, yeah? And so I wrote Corn-Fed Bloodthirsty Girls as a way of trying to call back up these memories of me being the only Black girl in my classroom, and my teacher changing my grades, and my mother having to have it out with my white teacher and prove to her that I was the owner of the words that I put on the page. And we talk a lot about microaggressions, and I think that there's something about the word micro that leads us to believe that the impact is small when that's a lie. Those things stay with me even today. This is Corn-Fed Bloodthirsty Girls. They say the corn remembers. Every kernel a tooth, every stalk a spine. When the wind moves through it, you can hear the old hymns, the ones that called lightning down on any girl who dared to run. All of Indiana was once a churchyard farmland. Rows of gold husks bowed in prayer, smoke curling like incense over graves. The Midwest was never innocent. It only learned to hide its blood in plain sight. Under every silo, under a secret altar, under every field a feast. When I was 7, I thought the silence meant safety, but even the soil hums names if you stand still long enough. When I was 19, a friend at IU whispered that the Klan still holds its anniversary marches through the dark to remind the corn whose masters it was. She said the hoods move like moths around a single burning cross, the kind that leaves ash on your tongue. And I remember how the lakes swallow the bodies, but never give back the bones, how the dunes shift to cover the proof, but the ghosts keep rising, weak, pale, and wanting. I left that stale state like a woman fleeing a plague, thinking hurricanes would be kinder than men who pray with rifles. But hauntings travel, they stow away in the bloodstream, hide behind the eyes, and you can't outrun what was planted in you. Now, some nights I dream of corn sprouting from my wrist, the silk curling like veins. I wake to the sound of chewing, the echo of 1,000 small moths singing grace. Don't be afraid, though, I tell myself. The sky isn't full of murder today. No crows, no choir, just the soft, relentless hymn of something still feasting for blood. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna liven it up a little. So I don't like country music. But I thought I didn't. That's a lie. And then I discovered a couple of songs that I love. I was talking to my friend that picks me up, Jen, about some of the songs that I have a hate love relationship with. Because again, for me, it held this really salty memory that as a Black queer woman, I wasn't allowed to like something that was born in the Deep South, right? And then, of course, I learned about the history of country music and how Black folks sing country music and how I can love whatever I want to love. And so I wrote Cornflake Girl for a journal that commissioned me to talk about a time when I acted in a way that was the opposite of what I was taught. And still today, I laugh because if my mom knew I really loved the show Reba, I think that she would actually have a conniption. This is Cornflake Girl. I was a Black girl in Indiana cornfields, church pews, and no love for country, but I still knew every word to Chattahoochee. Alan Jackson made a river sound like freedom, like small town sin and summer skin. Chattahoochee, what a word. Doesn't it sound like nature laughing makes us blush that Georgia peach pink? I wasn't supposed to be a cornflake girl, not with my pressed church dresses and knees stuck together in Sunday school. But Tori taught me how to unravel, how to rebel, and how it could taste like honey and still leave a sting. I remember when vagina felt like a curse word in my 12-year-old mouth. And then I learned that a flower's stem is called a coccyx, and the skin of your elbow is called a weenus. And that day is when my Baptist guilt gave out, when language stopped feeling like holiness and started sounding like a dare. Words are funny like that. We stack them like stones, heirloom warnings. Don't say that, as if syllables could save us from the dark. And still in the shadows we utter them. Petal, stem, stamen, say it 10 times fast and try not to sound dirty. Now say it again without the ruler on your knuckles, without the dish soap foaming in your mouth after you told Betsy Carlson to go fuck herself. And you didn't know what it meant at the time, just like you just wanted her to suffer the weight of syntax. The bruised coccyx wants company, doesn't it? But what if we laid it all down? The shame, the tongue like a blade, the hushed hymns passed down like heirlooms, and what if we weren't weapons today? Then what would we throw at the Betsies of the world to make them feel what we feel? Screw you, Betsy. Only screw you means I want you whole. I wish you the ache of blooming, Betsy, the sharp pink place where the poppy hurts to grow. I hate you. But hate means may you witness violets cracking open at the right light. Tonight, may you dream only of petals. Rest now, because in the morning we name every unholy thing beautiful. We Midwest church girls grew up tight-lipped liturgies, but we found a way to wail. So scream that Chattahoochee, every forbidden word we whispered into the wind and dared to call our own. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna do the preacher line. Y'all still with me? Okay, that's what my preacher always says. So we're gonna move over to Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat for a second. My husband was like, you should ask them what their favorite poem is. In the middle of your set, tell them to raise your hand and give you poems you should read. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I didn't prepare all the poems in this book. So I want to read Body Apology because it's a true story. So as Bobby so eloquently put, I have traveled nationally for over 12 years, competing on the national and southern and regional poetry slam circuit. And I was at the Denver, we just talked about this, that's crazy. So at the Denver competition for nationals, I kid you not, I went to go write poems preparing for this book, and a family came in the door and stood basically on top of me as if I was not there at the table. It was a table set for 5. And they were backing up, and I said nothing. I got up out of my seat, ran out, cried, and wrote this poem. And I called a mentor of mine to contend with what had just happened. The scenario was a little longer than that, but I didn't know at the time that what was unsettling for me was that I had grappled with invisibility for a really long time. And so not only was there a racial dynamic happening, but there was also something about who I thought I was, that I wasn't welcome there, but I also didn't have the words formed yet to advocate for myself in that moment. And there was shame that was happening afterwards that I had to contend with. This is body apology. Today, I left a space so white bodies could inhabit more comfortably. Today, I got out of my seat so a white family can sit in my place. Today, I accommodated a white body. No, thank you. I am often accommodating. Today, a white family stood behind my table, pressing against my back, and I was expected to leave, never asked. I should have planted my black body instead of being uprooted from my seat like a weed to be plucked. Today, I was an apology. I apologize for my presence and no one says thank you. I apologize for my presence often. I get cut off. I end up apologizing. I am pushed past, walked in front of. Excuse me? No response. Sometimes I go to white spaces, plant myself, just because I know my roots aren't welcome there. So we talked earlier about Southern foreclosures. And when I first moved, so I talked to you about a little bit about how I don't feel connected to anywhere. I moved away at 17. I went to college early. I then hated the South. It was terrifying. And then found out about trauma, didn't ever want to go home. And so I kind of felt like a person without a home, but also I felt no sense of connection to anywhere. And I sat down to write this poem because I learned that not only could I start to form a home by building community that was safe, but also that I wasn't this random being without any tethers to the South, that my family has so many connections and webs that extend from all places, from Mississippi to Alabama to North Carolina. And so in Southern foreclosures, I contend with fear, but also this strange definition of what is home. 1. Long back roads still rattle me, still make me fear being asked to step out. The nightstick, the gun, body turned to roadkill, left on the curb, forgotten. 2. Pitch black nights still remind me of the torch, the deep fried flesh tarred and feathered, watching bodies swing like gruesome drive-in films. 3. Open fields remind me of leather whips raking fingers through grass, blood, sweat, lathered cotton, body parts left out for fertilizer. 4. Farm animals grazing, buying and selling meat, ripping mother for consumption, burning and branding the slaughter, hanging out to dry like jerky. 5. Big plantation houses remind me of house slave and field nigga, of maid and mistress, of dinner service, of bronze bodies, expensive ornaments fresh off the auction block. 6. State fairs reminds me of the come see the hanging Negro. Where can I place my bid? This one has a strong back, good teeth, and broad shoulders, not the whole family. How much for the little boy and girl? 7. Hunting season and wild woods still remind me of running through forests, of bullets grazing black skulls, of branches cutting ankles, underground railroads, hiding under the creek from coon dogs and sniffing out the smell of a runaway. 8. The Cape Fear River reminds me of the drowning, throwing bodies over the bridge to hide the evidence, the vanishing of whole families, how they threw us over ships like rotten catfish. 9. Boxing matches remind me of strapping black brutes fighting for bets, bare knuckle knocking out until unconscious for entertainment, toasting to the tearing of flesh, smoking a cigar in celebration when one was dead. 10. Southern Belle and Sweet Tea sounds like centuries of injustice. Southern comfort tastes a lot like privilege. Southern hospitality sounds too unsettling for me to ever call it home. Okay, I am rounding out. You still with me? So I had the honor and privilege of being featured on Ada Limon's podcast, and she read this poem, and I felt like I was going to pass out. Yes, she was my professor. Am I a stan? Yes, and yes, and yes. So I'm gonna read When Watching. What if Dorothy wasn't afraid of the wind? What if she welcomed the cyclone? The thought of being lifted, suspended in air as release? What if she saw it as an escape? Being tossed and jolted, maybe a change would occur if she shook fast enough. Maybe she liked not knowing if her body would survive the catch and release. Maybe being picked up and let go in chaos was freeing. I imagine she was raptured before the light of day had even kissed the earth. The swirl approached, and she went willingly, threw her head and arms back and let it consume her. And maybe, just maybe, she was waiting to be swept off her feet by a wild, uncontrollable thing. When I was 12 or 13, my mama caught me and a special girlfriend bouncing our vaginas off the end of the bedpost like live bait. Our bodies rubbing against the maple wood, trying to catch a spark on the cold, hard thing between our legs was an awakening. The mesquite of our innocence rising to where my mother and her friends sat talking, and we were just at the point of falling off the bone. The moment when the pink of the salmon is so tender. When my mother opened the door, doused our flames with holy water and scripture, and made us promise to forget the sweet communion of burning, years after she scrubbed our cedar from our clothes, I learned that my body is only alive when it is free to choose when and where it starts a fire, how long it allows itself to be wet and waiting. The power comes in knowing that my body is no tadpole, no fish to roast over hot coals. It is the flame itself, the blue and red ghost that survives even after the smoke clears. This is going to be my last poem. I had a request to do my Gilmore Girls poem. So if you all still want me to do that, I can. This is Floodgates and Fame. So I grew up in if you can't tell, I contend constantly. My next book is about the contending of queerness, blackness, religion, and southernness. And so I'm really excited. It's a novel in verse. I get to, kind of push boundaries by saying it's a novel in verse, although it's autobiographical. Don't you love that? And so I've been writing more poems about the same, the intersection of all of those identities. Mama say, cross your legs in church, girl, and I'm not sure what she thought would fly out. A bee, a psalm, a moan, wet-fanged beasts running to where we lost ourselves, where we first saw the light. Come where the dewdrops of mercy shine bright, shine all around us, both day and both, a liquid call that says, I am alive here. When I am gaped open and splayed like a fish platter. Whatever rushes out of me will be a flood, will be stampede, will be whatever Noah escaped from. That's what we've got between our legs. They boarded up the ark to get away from our wet jaws. They afraid of our flood beasts, our water beast so scary. Close it up and follow those elephants into the boat like good little girls. I notice that church women close their legs real tight. They drape cloths over their skirts and their knees to not show their private parts to the pastor. And I wonder, why are women always the ones plugging our holes? Why are we always hiding the gush like men be wolves without control? What if at night my vagina grew fangs? What if that's why my mama say, shut your feral flow? Maybe she worried about what my rabid, foaming lips will do when the preacher comes down from the pulpit. Thank you. Okay, we want Gilmore Girls, yes. This is in Electric Lit. All these poems are out there and published. You can read them. We will do Gilmore Girls. It's loading. Okay, here we go. Okay, this poem, as I told you, I have a love now. Down up, prepare yourself, because I heard y'all get real excited. And this poem is about my hate love. So emphasis on the hate, okay? So here we go. There is no chocolate ice cream in Stars Hollow or on getting help for my obsession with Gilmore Girls. I think of Lorelai's love of food and coffee and how white privilege is always finished bowl and feasting, consuming even the carton, never belly room enough for consequences. I love all the ways I'm forced to bask in white bodies embracing, expected to cream for 2-ply paper lips pressing together, a knot of hair nodding like dingy shoelaces, and how Lorelai never thinks of her 50 flavored choices, a multitude of men pining for her seen and centered ass. When you are a straight white woman, the love triangle is your sweet inheritance. Hand-spun in Caucasian confection, everyone wants to dip their tongue into her, pop rocks their taste buds onto her Anglo-fizz ecstasy, a froyo of vanilla brain freeze. While us queer Black women sit non-existent in the plot, wait for our 4 lines, $50 and a SAG credit, waiting for sexual tension to build between her and Diner Boy. Meanwhile, I would have fucked him and fled, because I never know what's good for me, and even if I do, I leave. I was never taught how to stay frozen, cone-gripped, and candy-hearted, but you learned, because you are everywhere. Snow White showed you a woman is only desirable when she is immovable and waiting to be carved into, while us brown girls never stick around long enough. We know that we'll melt if we stay still. So we stay silent here in the backdrop, waiting. Rory, you hear me? Is that you? I thought so. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Do we want to take a question or two? Do we have questions? Yeah. Hi. You're asking things that I can't with y'all. How are y'all so smart? That's a really good question. I think it depends on the poem, right? So I vary my technique. So if I'm talking about something so for instance, can I get really vulnerable with you all? When I do Southern foreclosures or poems that are like really difficult, especially on college campuses, it makes me uncomfortable because I know people are uncomfortable. And so when I go to write the poem, there's a conscious choice I make about certain subject matters to say, I don't give a damn about my reader. And there are poems where I keep my reader very close in mind. Southern Foreclosures or the opening poem, Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, I did not give a damn about anybody, right? I said, if I die today, I want this story to be told about what I experienced and what I saw and what I don't hear anybody talking about. And so I think that some of that push-pull of like keeping the reader close, keeping the reader far away or at a distance is very important for me, at least. And I teach my students to do that same game because I think sometimes that closeness can manipulate and influence how truthful and vulnerable and open and exposed you are, because you're always thinking, will they get it? Should I make it more digestible? Should I make it more comfortable for them? And so I think the reason why you see some of my poems be unapologetic is because they were when I was writing them. And I think you get my best self when I don't care about you. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, that's wow, because I just realized that. But yeah, did that answer your question? Okay. There's many stages of the show, right? So when you say show, do you just mean show anybody? Okay, so that's a very different question. So I would say there's no real answer to that. A poem, so let's start back what I thought you were asking me. What I thought you were saying was, when is a poem ready to be shown to someone? And I would say whenever you're ready to show it to someone. So I have this thing that I say is like, certain things, certain subjects, if you're not ready for it to be out in the world, don't think that other people are going to be ready. So like there's a certain internal work that you got to do, especially as someone who reads their poems. I'm very cognizant that if I haven't grappled with the subject, I probably shouldn't be reading it out loud. Yes. So I would say a poem to show someone, there are not a lot of steps. I would say if you're ready to show it, show it. Publishable is a whole nother ballgame, right? So I would suggest making sure that you actually get over that hump and fear of showing your peers and showing your friends and your professors and potential feedback partners, because that's how you get closer to the stage of it being published, is having more eyes and more eyes and more feedback and criticism on that piece. And then when you get the gumption to finally submit it, we talked about rejection earlier. The final thing that I'll say is, actually, I don't know when a poem is ever really ready. I think that you just, when you've done the work of the edit and the critique and the workshop of it, you just send it out. And it's like a gamble. You wish and you hope and you pray to what you believe in. And you say, it's done with me in my spirit, and I'm going to send this thing out. And then if you get the rejection, we talked earlier about how rejection can be beautiful, because then that gives you your guidebook for the future. My guidebook is to then go back and retool this poem and resend it out. And so I don't think it's ready. It's the game of send out, test, trial, come back, review, send it out, test, and trial. Does that make sense? I saw a question over here. I'm not laughing at you, but somebody literally asked your exact question earlier today. So that's so funny, because I've answered this question, but I'll say it again. So I have this joke that I do believe that titles make or break a poem. I kid you not, I have literally sent the same poem to a place, done nothing but change the title, and got that poem published. Is that necessarily like a good thing? I don't know, but it works, right? So I think that one, you thinking hard about your title is really smart, because I think it does carry a lot more weight than we give it credit for. I choose my titles. The explanation that I gave earlier was what, speaking of weight, what, how much weight do I want the title to carry? And should the title for a piece be synonymous with the tone, or can it be in polar opposite? Could it be in contention, or could it be in conflict with my subject matter to say something larger? And so I think about that a lot, is what type of work, that's the word that I was looking for, what type of work do I want my title to do, and how much do I want to give away? Because what we know about, going back to my friend's question, we know that when people are looking at your work, they're making a lot of snap judgments, right? So they're looking at the title and they're thinking, okay, I already know what this title is about. And one of my goals is to not allow you to think you know what my poem is about to be about. I want to surprise you. I want to shock and awe you, but I also kind of want to do the opposite with the title of what you think I'm going to do. And when you read the poem, I want you to say, interesting. When I go back to look at the title, I actually don't see the connection. I like that tension. I like that mystery and the curiosity. And so that's how I choose mine. But good luck on your journey. We want to take like maybe one or two more. One more? Okay. I saw this hand here. Yeah, I have found that that is something that has been showing up in my last. So I worked on Unlearning Eden for 3 years. And it wasn't until I started talking about that intersection that I was speaking about earlier, the many facets of my identity. There's something about the fluidity of nature and queerness. I have insomnia, and to go to sleep, TMI, I used to watch the Nature Channel. And one thing, you hear me? And so one thing that I learned was nature is very sexually fluid, okay? Turn on National Geographic if you don't believe me. And so I think that number one, that was some of it for me, is like, what is the vehicle to talk about fluidity? Why not use nature, because nature's already fluid, right? Number two for me was going back to what I was saying about placemaking. I've really struggled with the idea of family. And so I've had to, around every turn, as you could hear from my bio, create my own community. That's sort of kind of why I do a lot of building things and putting things out into the community. Selfishly, a lot of that is for me. And so I say that to say that in me building community, I have done a lot of crafting of community out in nature. And I finally learned in my 30s that that was like a safe place for me to build community and have these really difficult conversations. Like literally we would get together for our book clubs or our writing sessions, literally out in the park or in the woods. And what we know about our history of Black and brown and indigenous people is that's what our ancestors used to do. They would have their griot conversations around the campfire. They would be out in the woods. They would commune with nature. And so I think it's by no chance that I build community in nature. I find solace in nature, and it is a calming place for me. And I think now when I contend with hard subjects, it's like the hard and the soft. It's this really difficult subject, but why not put it in this beautiful pastoral place? Does that make sense? Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you.